Alright, so I originally planned to upload this as 3 separate parts, having one video for each individual arc, but after making all 3 videos, I decided to push them all together into this one long video instead. Now, Season 2 of Sword Art Online is widely considered to be the worst season in the series, and despite having many memorable moments, I still agree that this is by far the weakest season. I'll have timestamps throughout the video for each arc if you want to skip over to a certain one, and I also do a review of a secret Sword Art Online movie that a lot of you probably have not heard of. I thought I'd just throw this in here for fun because it technically is after the Fairy Dance arc and it's part of Season 2. And if I sound a bit different throughout the video, it's because I originally filmed reviews for each individual arc on different days, so that's why. Season 2 of Sword Art Online is widely considered the worst season in the series, so I wanted to give a deep dive analysis to see why that is. But yeah, let's get right into it. So I recently just rewatched the Phantom Bullet arc from Season 2 of Sword Art Online, which this arc seems to be the one that really divided the fan base. Some say it's mid, some say it's complete garbage, but at the same time, some people consider it to be one of the best arcs in the series, which I personally fall into the category of people that consider it to be one of the best arcs. But despite that, after giving this arc a rewatch and a deep dive analysis, I can fully understand the argument from the people saying that this arc is not good, or at least not as good as other people say. Now, there is a lot of stuff in today's video that I want to cover, things this arc does extremely well, and things it does, well, not so well. Now, the first thing I really like is Deathgun's introduction. Within the first 2 minutes of the episode, we're already introduced to our new antagonist for this arc, who goes by the name Deathgun. His appearance is mysterious, and his name is simple, yet menacing. The character gets an extremely dark entrance, where we immediately see the ruthlessness of the character, how he immediately kills Xerxes, just for the simple fact of him being a fraud. Now, I will say that when we see Kirito and Asuna for the first time in Season 2, I was kinda hoping for a few more slice-of-life moments of them spending time together. Like, they could have shown Asuna going over to Kirito's house to meet his parents, or something along those lines, because what we do get is pretty vague, and it would have been nice to have more scenes of them together before Kirito dives into GGO. Later, Kirito meets up with a man called Kikuoka, who is the leader of the task force for the Tech Bureau at the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He was the guy that was working to help remove the players that were trapped in SAO. He tells Kirito how a player in GGO had died in real life after a guy going by the name Deathgun had shot him inside of GGO, and that the guy ended up having a heart attack in real life at the exact same time he was shot inside of the game. Now, I thought this set up the arc pretty damn well. Kikuoka didn't really have anyone else he could turn to.
Who else am I gonna find? You're it! I need your help in this investigation!
And with Kirito being the most skilled player from SAO, he was the only one that he could really rely on. Now, everyone knows that the Aincrad arc of Sword Art Online has incredible visuals, but honestly, I prefer the overall setting of Gun Gale Online a lot more. It has this creepy wide open desert atmosphere filled with rundown buildings where you can literally get sniped from at any moment. The openness of the map creates constant tension, and it just feels a lot more threatening than Aincrad's enclosed floors. Now, in episode 2, we're introduced to Sinon, along with the other players she has teamed up with. Right away, this episode emphasizes how important positioning on the map is, and how crucial it is to watch your teammates' backs. Compared to Aincrad, GGO has far more open angles where enemies can attack from, which makes every decision feel riskier. Very early on, it's hinted that Sinon has past trauma.
This anxiety, this fear, this is nothing like how it felt that day.
This is also the first episode in Sword Art Online that doesn't feature Kirito or any of the main characters. It's a standalone episode focused entirely on Sinon, and I honestly really like this approach. Okay, actually, after watching it back, Kirito and the others did show up at like the end of the episode just for a couple of minutes, but still, it's pretty much Sinon's own episode. Now, because of this, we end up knowing way more about Sinon than Kirito does when he eventually meets her. That makes it way more interesting later on, because we get to watch Kirito slowly uncover the same things about her that we already know, just from his perspective instead. We also see Sinon's bravery displayed throughout the episode, and her willingness to do whatever it takes to survive, which sets up the arc perfectly, because we realize how badass the fights are gonna be. When Sinon takes off the Amusphere afterward, we see her in clear emotional distress, but without fully revealing what she's been through yet, it makes us question her reasoning for playing GGO if she's clearly in distress. Like, is she using the game to escape real life? Or is the game itself causing these feelings? It keeps us intrigued and wanting to know more about the character. Later, we see Sinon threatened by her classmates, who are forcing her to give them money. It's revealed that the girls bullying her know about her trauma, and deliberately use it against her, which causes Sinon to completely break down. Luckily, her friend Kyoji steps in and comes to her rescue. One of the reasons why I feel the Phantom Bullet arc is one of the best arcs in the show is its incredible rewatch value. Knowing that Kyoji is actually Deathgun's younger brother, who is working alongside him, completely changes how you view his character on a second watch. You start to see just how dark he truly is, as he pretends to be Sinon's friend while secretly being a murderer in disguise. They discuss the weapons and strategies of certain players in the game, and I gotta say, this intrigued me a lot. Unlike the Aincrad arc where everything is very straightforward, as in just trying to level up as much as you can and not take too much damage in a fight, Gun Gale Online is more so about using your surroundings to your advantage, getting the high ground, looking for cover, using certain guns over others in different scenarios to give yourself an advantage. Now, I know they didn't expand on it as much as they could have, but I still found it incredibly intriguing. Sinon says that if she can prove that she is the strongest and can take out all her enemies, then she will be free. At this point in the show, we've gotten quite a few hints that she's been dealing with something that has emotionally wounded her, but we're still not sure what that is though. We do get some internal dialogue where she says,
"With her in my hands, I'm sure I can crack the higher ranks."
And she's quick to correct herself when she says kill. She says that if she wins this, she can prove to herself that she's finally free. But free from what exactly? Now, when Sinon gets back to her apartment later that night, her trauma is finally revealed after giving the perfect amount of build-up. Once again, I really like how we found out all of this information before Kirito does. I think it was a smart decision, and it made it far more entertaining. It allows us to see how it contrasts Kirito's relationship with Sinon throughout the arc by allowing us to know the underlying thoughts of someone with severe trauma and seeing how people hide their fears to distance themselves from others. Now, one thing I don't really understand is Kirito's nurse. I don't understand the author's obsession with making every woman desire Kirito, but this is the nice thing about Sinon's character, because for once there's no flirting involved. We finally get a break from that and delve into a deeper relationship between the characters that doesn't have anything to do with romance. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoy romance in Sword Art Online, but when every single character is falling in love with Kirito, it can tend to get a little repetitive and boring to say the least. Which is funny because I put out a poll a while ago asking you guys who you'd want Kirito to end up with in a relationship if he wasn't with Asuna, and the majority of you guys said Sinon. And even though I didn't agree with that at first because I thought Lisbeth would have been the best girl for him, but after rewatching the Phantom Bullet arc, I can say that I'm in 100% agreement that Sinon and Kirito would have been the best together. Arguably, they could have made a better couple than Kirito and Asuna. Their overall maturity and growth throughout the arc feels earned, and I wish the author would have expanded on her character a bit more. Later, we finally get to see Sinon and Kirito meet up for the first time, which Sinon thinks that Kirito is a girl, and Kirito kinda just goes along with it. Bro's just like, it's 2025, my body, my choice, and because he's like, I can't blow my cover either. Kirito being dirt broke and needing money quickly, Sinon takes him to the casino where he uses his bullet prediction skills, which I guess he somehow just has that skill for no apparent reason, and he uses that skill to win the casino game, which that's one thing I don't really understand. I thought it would have been a lot better to make Kirito not as strong as he was in Sword Art Online, considering this is a new game he's never played before. It would have been nice to give him more of a learning curve, and I can definitely see why this season gets a lot of hate. Like, Kirito being an overpowered main character was clearly a problem, but I guess the author just didn't feel like fixing the issue going into season 2. Sinon also does look kinda suspicious as well about how Kirito knows so much when it comes to fighting, because he hasn't told her that he's actually from SAO. Later, it turns out that Kirito and Sinon won't be facing off against each other until the last bracket of the preliminary rounds, which if they make it to the last bracket, then they automatically qualify for the Battle of the Bullets tournament, which I thought was a good decision because this allows Kirito to get the hang of GGO and learn about the game before him and Sinon cross paths again, and plus this makes it so Sinon can be included in the entire arc, because if Sinon had to face Kirito earlier on, then there's a good chance that she wouldn't make it to the final bracket, which would have made the arc pretty boring. And when it's finally revealed to Sinon that Kirito is actually a dude, she wants nothing to do with him anymore, which Kirito's like, yeah, I know you don't really mean that, so I'm just gonna keep following you around anyways. Now in Kirito's first actual match of GGO, this is where I did feel a little bit disappointed, because I thought that maybe there was gonna be a learning curve for him, and I guess there was when he was learning to reflect bullets with his photon sword, but unfortunately that learning curve only lasted about 5 seconds. Like, bro is literally doing handstand backflips while becoming Anakin Skywalker's successor. Like, this is one thing that I think is so dumb about this arc. Like, I get that his character data is converted over to GGO, but still I don't remember in season 1 of SAO seeing Kirito doing backflips, but maybe I'm just remembering season 1 incorrectly. Later, we finally see Kirito meet Deathgun for the first time. Now, I thought Deathgun's entrance was alright. I think that it would have been cooler to see Kirito meet Deathgun in the middle of the match rather than afterwards, but I guess they wanted Kirito to meet him first, so Kirito could realize that he's part of Laughing Coffin, making it so Kirito and Sinon are forced to confront their PTSD earlier on, which makes it more psychologically horrifying for both of them. So overall, I guess that was a pretty good decision on the author's part. Now, Deathgun isn't sure if that's actually Kirito, or if it's someone else pretending to be Kirito, because Kirito's playing on a new account, but at the same time, bro literally looks exactly like his avatar in SAO. The only difference is that he has longer hair, which I think is so dumb. Like, how can he not tell that that is Kirito?
I'll ask you again, are you the real deal?
Just like how Kirito's sister somehow didn't recognize Kirito in ALO. Like, bro, how? Also, I gotta say, when we get flashbacks of Kirito and the Knights of the Blood Oath fighting Laughing Coffin in SAO, like, why did we not get to watch that fight in the Aincrad arc? This literally would have been the best fight in the entire show, and it's such a shame that we'll never get to see the full fight. However, I am happy they added this as a flashback scene, because this gives us more backstory on Kirito's PTSD, and just how bad it really was for him. Now, after experiencing that traumatic flashback, and having Sinon come back over to see if he's okay, she sees this scared look in his eyes that reminds Sinon of her own pain and trauma. And then my boy Kirito, feeling emotionally unstable, goes full freaking beast mode, which, like, goddamn, I would have loved to see more of Kirito like this. Like, this scene was so freaking awesome. Now, when Kirito and Sinon are in the final bracket of the preliminary rounds, Sinon starts to open up, showing Kirito that this is much more deep than just a game to her, and that there's something much greater that she's dealing with emotionally. After they fight, Kirito reveals to Sinon about the pain he's been dealing with. He doesn't go super in-depth, but it's enough for Sinon to relate to and develop a deep emotional attachment to him. Unlike the other girls that we've been introduced to in SAO, that only liked Kirito for the fact of him being a strong stoic swordsman, Sinon's connection to Kirito feels a lot deeper, and it's arguably an even deeper connection than what Kirito and Asuna have. Also, one thing I noticed is that back at Kirito's home, he still has his nerve gear headset, which is kinda insane to me. Like, bro, why do you have that in your house? Like, is that not giving you PTSD? Like, if I were him, I would have thrown that nerve gear out a long time ago, not keep it like a souvenir. I remember that in season 1, Kirito transferred Yui's data to his nerve gear before she got deleted, so maybe that's why he's keeping it, because maybe he still needs it for that reason. But yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to point out that I thought was a little bit weird. Maybe someone can like leave a comment section, maybe I missed a part of the show, or just misinterpreted something, but yeah, I don't know. Now, even though Sinon can relate to Kirito, she's still upset with him and mad that he lied to her, and she still really wants to beat him in the tournament. Later, Kyoji tries opening up to Sinon, which Sinon pulls away again. I still don't think that Sinon was fully catching on to what Kyoji was getting at, but even still, it's clear that she doesn't carry any romantic feelings for him, and he doesn't seem to understand that. This is where I started to question Kyoji's character on my first watch of the arc. I didn't think that he had anything to do with Death Gun, but I felt this weird underlying psychotic energy that the character was giving off. Now, halfway through the arc, we get to see Kirito's breaking point, where we see Kirito in a completely vulnerable state, where he becomes overwhelmed by the negative feelings of guilt and trauma that Laughing Coffin had put him through, and how he isn't able to bottle up these emotions anymore.
I killed people. I killed them and I can't even remember who they were. Don't you get it? It's like I don't even care that they're dead. I don't deserve to find any peace.
I think this is one of the best moments in all of Sword Art Online, and also one of the best dubbed voice acting performances to this date. He explains how even though he had a choice, he still decided to kill the members of Laughing Coffin out of revenge and rage, and that he feels like a monster because he can't even remember what they looked like. This scene really delves deep into the guilt he's been feeling and shows his PTSD, trauma, and grief to their full extents. I'm sure a lot of viewers can relate in some way to the feelings of guilt and trauma Sinon and Kirito go through in this arc, and I feel like this is such a hit or miss arc, because the people who love it a lot of the time relate to a lot of the emotional pain that the characters go through. And even though the nurse is kind of flirty and perverted, she was actually the perfect character to open up to because she has a similar experience, and that is that she has to make quick decisions of who she can save, and that you have to think about the people you have saved compared to those you couldn't. She gives him insight, saying that if he didn't care, he wouldn't be suffering like this. Overall, this is one of my favorite moments in the arc, and I wish they would have expanded on it a bit more. I know I already touched on this a bit earlier, but the overall layout for the BOB is a far more entertaining battlefield compared to the concept of Aincrad, in my opinion. It's this huge 10-kilometer map in diameters that has mountains, forests, and deserts, which every 15 minutes a little satellite passes over top of the map, which reveals everyone's location. So even though the map is very large and easy to hide in, you can only stay in one location for so long, which pretty much forces you to make a move every 15 minutes, which makes the overall pacing of the game pretty exciting, and it leaves a lot of strategy to find cover and good positioning to get the drop on your enemy. It kinda reminds me of Fortnite, how the game eventually forces players to make a move and puts that deep pressure on them. Now, one thing that did kind of annoy me is how Sinon didn't make the connection that Kirito was referring to Sword Art Online. He opens up about how he was put in a position where he had to kill because of life or death circumstances, and surely Sinon and the entire world would have had to have heard about the SAO incident by now. So that's one thing I just really didn't understand, and maybe I'm missing something here and I just interpreted the scene wrong, but yeah, that was something I thought the author should have written out a bit better in my opinion. Later, Kirito finds out that there are 3 people in the BOB that Sinon doesn't recognize, so one of them has to be Death Gun, which later in the day during the BOB, Kirito runs into Sinon and is just like, oh hey babe, yeah, so there's kind of this guy with a gun that like kills people in real life when you get shot by it in the game. So, yeah, we should probably just sit back and learn before we go and try to get ourselves killed. And Sinon is like, alright, that's cool and all, but I'm still gonna try and kill you afterwards. And Kirito's just like, yeah, sounds good. Now at first, Kirito is like, yo, it's probably the guy who's jumping around like Spider-Man, who is Death Gun. That has to be it. but he gets zapped down and Kirito's like, oh wait, never mind, Death Gun is the same guy that I saw in the cloak earlier. Duh. Now, something that is very important that needs to be addressed is that how could they not come up with a better slogan for Death Gun to say other than
Death Gun is my name, and the name of my gun.
Like, I'm sorry, but that shit was so damn lame. Boring! Like, I don't know what the author was thinking when he came up with that, but like, that is literally the most garbage line I have ever heard.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Now, when Death Gun finally does kill in front of Kirito and Sinon, this is one of the most terrifying deaths, just for the fact that we still have no idea how he's doing it. Like in SAO, the creator of the game explained everything, so when someone died in the game, it wasn't as big of a shock, and that's one thing that really stands out in this arc compared to the Aincrad arc, is just the overall mystery behind everything. And when Death Gun kills in front of them, he officially confirms out loud to everyone that he is Death Gun, which Kirito originally wasn't sure about. He knew that the guy in the cloak was a member of Laughing Coffin, but now seeing him kill a player in-game allows him to confirm that that is actually Death Gun. Another important thing that I think this arc really needed was a separate side plot for Asuna and the others. It wouldn't have needed to be something big, but just some type of little mission where they could switch between Kirito and Sinon's storyline, and Asuna and the group's storyline. I felt that the Calibur arc could have fit perfectly in the Phantom Bullet arc, but maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, Sinon and Kirito decide to work together to take down the bigger threat and save their battle against each other for afterwards. They end up coming to the conclusion that one of the players showing up on the satellite who goes by the name Jushi X is probably Death Gun, because the name Jushi X has some underlying meaning to do with death, but they end up being totally wrong about that. Death Gun is one step ahead of Kirito and Sinon, because when they split up to get the drop on him, Death Gun's just like, yeah, sorry bro, I actually got the Harry Potter invisibility cloak. But Kirito swoops in and saves Sinon before Death Gun can kill her, and they make it to safety. I think they could have done this part a bit better. Kirito just took out Jushi X, saw that she was a girl, and was like, yeah, no, that can't be Death Gun, then just looked over at Sinon on the ground. Like, I think they should have made it so maybe Kirito picks up on a certain clue and realizes something is off about the situation, which makes him go back to check on Sinon. I think that would have been a lot more interesting. But after making it to the hideout, this is where the dialogue peaks in the arc, and is arguably some of the best dialogue across the entire series. Kirito explains to Sinon just how much he has changed as a person. Like how before, he would have charged right at Death Gun head first, but now, since he has Asuna and Yui, he can't afford to take a risk like that, which shows just how much Kirito has grown and matured throughout the series. And that makes it so Sinon finally feels comfortable enough with Kirito to fully open up about her trauma she experienced when she was a kid, which this makes Kirito open up about his similar trauma when he had to kill people in SAO. For some reason, this is the first time he mentions to her that he is an SAO survivor. This shows how Kirito pushed his trauma deep down to try to forget about it, but seeing Death Gun has made it resurface, and now he must face Death Gun to overcome his trauma. Sinon also feels the need to face Death Gun to overcome her PTSD, and to regain control over her fears. This is where everything ties together, where both protagonists must come together and face their fears, not only to overcome their trauma and fears, but to save the lives of other players in the game. Kirito mentions that they had captured Death Gun in Sword Art Online, and that they had him imprisoned, so it made me kinda confused that the police weren't able to track down the members of Laughing Coffin in real life and arrest them. Like, I thought at least someone would have remembered their names and reported them to the police, but I guess not. Kirito and Sinon both end up learning from each other's trauma. By hearing each other's stories, it opens a path for them to see clearly. They learn that they are not supposed to forget, and that it's good that they don't forget what it means to kill, and the significance of taking a life. And by them accepting this fact is how they will find closure. Now, I gotta say, how Kirito discovers the secrets behind Death Gun's killings is actually pretty well done. It's Kirito slowly putting each piece of the puzzle together, asking himself questions like, why didn't he use the Death Gun on me when I saved Sinon? And why every time before he kills Does he have to have an audience? Everything is slowly starting to come together, and when they find out that Sinon is Deathgun's next target, and that Deathgun's partner, who has been doing all the killing, is waiting in her apartment, this is the moment where the show's suspense skyrockets, and gives us that high-stakes Aincrad arc feel that a lot of fans had been wanting back so badly. They are forced to make the first move by killing one of the remaining players in the game to make sure he doesn't get killed by Deathgun, which makes Deathgun come after Kirito, revealing Deathgun's position, which Sinon and Deathgun both end up taking out each other's snipers, which leads to everything being perfectly in place for Kirito to verse Deathgun in a 1v1. I think that the overall setup is perfect here. My only wish is for the fight to be a bit longer. It just felt like after watching 12 episodes for this fight, it would have been nice for it to even be just 1 minute longer. Now the final battle itself is freaking awesome, and I argue that this is the overall best looking fight in the whole series. If we're not comparing it to the improved graphics in Season 3, just the overall dark setting of the battlefield with Kirito's purple photon sword just worked perfectly together. But most importantly, this fight allows Kirito and Sinon to face their fears together. It's them actively confronting and reclaiming control over their trauma instead of being paralyzed by it. And Kirito's kill on Deathgun was insanely badass. Deathgun wasn't just a villain in this arc, he's a manifestation of unresolved trauma, and by facing him directly, they are not erasing their trauma, but challenging its power over them. Kirito carried survivor's guilt, moral injury from killing to survive, and the fear of becoming a killer again. When he fights Deathgun, he chooses to fight instead of running from his past. He accepts that what he did was real, but doesn't let it define his worth. He stops seeing himself as a monster and starts seeing himself as someone who survived and protected others. For Kirito, defeating Deathgun means integrating his past instead of rejecting it. Sinon's fear of guns stems from a childhood moment where she acted to save herself and her mother. When Sinon confronts Deathgun, she faces the same kind of threat that traumatized her. This time she acts by choice, not panic, and she proves to herself that fear doesn't equal weakness. For Sinon, the victory is about agency, realizing that she isn't powerless anymore. Their victory shows that trauma doesn't disappear when you win. Healing is about facing, understanding, and living with it. Support matters, and they couldn't do it alone. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but acting despite it. They don't become fixed, they become stronger, more self-aware, and less controlled by fear. One thing I also really liked about the fight scene was that Kirito thought to shoot Deathgun to cancel out his invisibility. I thought that was a great decision on the creator's end there. Now after Kirito and Sinon win the BOB, and Sinon wakes back up at her apartment, Kyoji shows up outside her apartment, calling her name, which I instantly knew something was up just from the overall change of tone in his voice.
Asada? You there? It's me, Asada.
He sounded concerned, but at the same time almost upset, but my brain still didn't draw the conclusion that he was the other Deathgun, considering how obsessed he was with Sinon. Now when Kyoji tells Sinon that he's the other Deathgun, he also reveals how he needed to be the one to kill her, because he doesn't want another man to touch her, even if it's his own brother. So much is revealed in this one scene, and even though I think Kyoji is absolutely disgusting trash, I still think he is a great villain, just due to his overall backstory, since society wasn't kind to him to begin with, and how it made him feel like there was nothing left for him in the real world. He became the perfect victim, allowing his older brother to manipulate him, and turn him into a monster. Now even though Kyoji literally said that he wanted to be the one that killed her, because he didn't like the thought of another man having his hands on her, he still feels this connection to Sinon, because she has also killed someone, and it gives him this mentally insane, one-sided obsession with her that is just so bizarre. Like when I watched this for the first time, my mouth literally dropped to the floor because of just how absurd and far gone this guy has come. Kyoji is the classic case of neglection in adolescence, someone who was not treated well by others and had become detached from society. And this is also one of the reasons why he felt so connected to Sinon, because she had also become detached from society and had her fellow peers view her as an outcast. Sinon, absolutely helpless and in immense fear, takes everything she has learned from her and Kirito's journey together to build the courage to fight back, because she knows it has to be done. Literally, in this one episode alone, it felt like every piece of the puzzle from this arc falls perfectly into place without being forced. Kirito rushes into her apartment to save her because luckily she had told him her real-life address, but just when everything looks like it's all over, when Kirito gets stabbed with the syringe Kyoji had been using to kill people, it turns out that Kyoji had just happened to stab the needle of the syringe into the electrode from the heart monitor that Kirito had been hooked up to in the hospital. To be honest, I thought this part was kind of ridiculous. Like, they could have made it so much better by making Sinon rush Kirito to the hospital, and once they finally got there, that's when it could have been revealed that Kirito is actually okay, and that way Sinon could have met Asuna right away as well. At least in my opinion, that would have made this scene a lot better. Later on, we're able to see Sinon face her classmates that had been bullying her, showing that she's come to terms with what she has done, and she's not gonna let fear or helplessness control her life anymore. Later, Kikuoka reveals that Kyoji and his older brother had been arrested, and that Kyoji's older brother said they did nothing wrong because they did the exact same killings in Aincrad and were not charged for it, which shows the even darker impact that SAO had on its victims. Not just trauma that players endured while trying to survive, but by how it altered some players' minds and brought out darker motives and god complexes. The ending of the arc is the cherry on the cake when Sinon meets the woman from the bank that was getting robbed when she was a kid, and the woman explains how if it weren't for her shooting that guy, then her little daughter would have never been born. And this moment wraps up the Phantom Bullet arc literally perfectly, ending with self-forgiveness. I know a lot of people consider this arc to be mid, but I personally really enjoy it, and I have it in my top 3 arcs of the series. It definitely has its flaws, and that's okay. No TV show is perfect, and the overall emotional impact of the arc is extremely well done. The Calibur Arc in Sword Art Online has always been considered one of the worst arcs in the series. When you ask someone what their favorite arc is, they'll usually say either the Fairy Dance arc or the Calibur Arc, and sometimes they might even say the first half of Alicization. Now, unlike the Fairy Dance arc, which is hated mainly just for the fact of us being introduced to the worst villain in the entire show, fight scenes that kinda just go nowhere, and a weird incest plotline, where in comparison, the Calibur arc is mainly disliked just for the fact that it's complete filler with really low stakes. The Calibur arc has some of the lowest rated episodes across Sword Art Online, according to the IMBD ratings. So I decided to give the Calibur arc a rewatch to see if the hate for this arc was actually deserved or not. The story starts off with Kirito and Sugu at the dinner table. They discuss about the holy sword Excalibur that has just been found in ALO, and how they want to go on a quest to be the ones to retrieve it. So they hop into ALO and meet up with the rest of their friends. Now this is one thing this arc does way better than any other, which is including the full cast of the show in the plotline. In the Aincrad arc, it was pretty much just Kirito and Asuna. In the Fairy Dance arc, it was just Sugu and Kirito, and in the Phantom Bullet arc, it was just Sinon and Kirito, which occasionally we would have other characters make small appearances in the arcs, but for the most part, they were kinda just pushed to the side. Now, to retrieve the Excalibur sword, they have to make their way down to Jotunheim, which is a hidden underground world beneath ALO, which they take a quick 5-minute walk down into Jotunheim, which is a shortcut because otherwise it takes like 2 hours to get there, which once they get to Jotunheim, they catch a quick cab ride on Sugu's flying jellyfint called Tonki, which she had previously met the day before, which this kinda reminds me of Appa from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now they are traveling to a pyramid which is hanging upside down beneath the World Tree, which is where they can begin the quest to retrieve Excalibur. But there is also some type of kill quest that has been going on in Jotunheim, where if players kill all the kinfolk off that live in Jotunheim, then they can earn the Excalibur sword that way as well. Now as they are traveling to retrieve Excalibur, they are greeted by a mysterious-looking entity who goes by the name Urt, who is also known as Queen of the Lake. Long story short, Jotunheim has been taken over by the Frost Giants, and their leader who goes by the name Thrymr. Thrymr and the Frost Giants come from a world beneath called Niflheim. Jotunheim and Niflheim used to have a peace treaty, but one day Thrymr's just like, yeah, no, I actually want more power. Thrymr casted the Excalibur sword into the Well of Urt, which is the heart of their land, turning their once green and luscious land to ice and snow. It destroyed the roots of the World Tree, and Jotunheim lost the blessings from Yggdrasil, which is more commonly referred to as the World Tree. The World Tree roots grew up out of Jotunheim, and the only thing left is the pyramid with the Excalibur left at the bottom, which once Thrymr and the Ice Giant took control of Jotunheim, they built Thrymheim, which is the biggest castle that sits on top of the massive ice once known as the Well of Urt. So basically, Kirito and the gang gotta stop Thrymr and the Ice Giants, so Thrymheim, that castle, won't rise to Elfheim Online and destroy everything. The goal of Thrymr is to move up and destroy Arun, which is the capital city of Elfheim Online, where he wants to turn everything into ice and take control, and his end goal being to take the golden apple that is growing at the top of the World Tree. Now I know I said long story short, but there's just so much little detail that goes into this arc. One of my favorite things about this arc is that it's actually structured like a real video game quest. Rumor of a hidden quest, optional high-level dungeon unlock, multi-floor raid area, boss encounters with mechanics, final boss with a time limit, legendary loot reward. That's basically a textbook MMO raid quest, and a lot of people agree that this is what the Aincrad arc should have been like, which I also completely agree with. Even though the Aincrad arc follows it to a certain extent, the Calibur arc was just able to structure everything a lot better. Another thing that really stands out about the Calibur arc is its foundation in Norse mythology, a collection of myths, gods, and legends from the ancient Norse and Germanic peoples of Scandinavia. The quest draws on elements like Jotunheim, the giants, and the conflict between gods and chaos. While this mythology was designed by the developers of Elfheim Online, it's the cardinal system that enforces the rules of the quest, which, like fate in Norse myth, Cardinal doesn't care who the players are. It simply ensures that the events unfold according to the system's laws. This makes Norse mythology a perfect fit for the Cardinal system, because both are built around the idea of structured fate and freedom of action within an unavoidable set of rules. Now back to the story. Thrymr has manipulated the fairies of ALO into believing in this kill quest to help them take over Jotunheim faster, so that they can move their way up to Arun. So basically, Kirito and the gang gotta go through Thrymheim to get the Excalibur, and once the sword is retrieved, the blessings of Yggdrasil will return to the land of Jotunheim. Thrymr and the Ice Giants will be defeated, and the castle will vanish. And since Thrymr has sent a bunch of giants to attack the kinfolk, that means the castle is vulnerable right now, and they must attack while they can. And Urt gives them a little amulet and says that if the stone turns black, then all her kinfolk have been slain, and her remaining powers will have left her, which they accept the quest and head towards Thrymheim. The gang learns that there's a stripped down version of the Cardinal system that runs all the other VR MMOs, but this version that runs ALO is the full spec version, which is the same type that ran SAO, which means that the quest they were given to retrieve Excalibur was generated based on Norse mythology, and will end the same way the myth did with destruction if they don't do something to stop it. And even though ALO is in danger of being destroyed by Thrymr, the Cardinal system has no other choice but to enforce it. They are worried because if they can't retrieve Excalibur, then ALO will be destroyed along with New Aincrad, which Lisbeth is scared that her blacksmith shop might be destroyed, and Klein is also scared. He says, "There goes finding my soulmate." Like, bro, you can just go meet a chick in the real world. Like, what do you mean? So the only way to stop it is for Kirito and everyone to complete the quest. Now, it would have been cool to see these bosses in ALO, because the fight scenes throughout this small arc are actually really cool, and the teamwork between players is just the cherry on top. The only problem is just the overall lack of suspense, because in the Aincrad arc, if you die in the game, you die in real life. And in the Phantom Bullet arc, if you get killed in the game, then Deathgun's partner would be waiting back at your apartment getting ready to take you out. And even though Fairy Dance didn't have a die in the game, die in real life concept, there still felt like a good amount of suspense because Kirito had to get Asuna back. The Calibur arc has the lowest ratings of the entire show, and I can definitely somewhat understand that, but at the same time I think that the Fairy Dance arc was technically worse. We barely get any fights in the Fairy Dance arc, and it just felt really dragged out, and eventually led us to the worst antagonist of all time. Now it would have been cool to see some of these bosses in the Fairy Dance arc. I know they're going to be a bit different because it's not based on Norse mythology, but still I think it would have been great. The only real suspense from the arc comes from the time crunch that they are on, so they can save Arun and restore peace to the land, which I guess was a decent plot. People always considered SAO to be the best game, but personally I think ALO is the best. Now yes, obviously Kirito doesn't look as cool as he does in SAO as the Black Swordsman, but I think the magic aspect of ALO is what makes it better. Things like having unique sword spells for the characters, and even Pina has her own bubble breath spell. And this was the first time in the series that it felt like every character actually had a purpose and had to work together. We see this later on in the War of the Underworlds arc, but I honestly feel like it's even better here. Now there's 4 floors in total, and they gotta get to the final floor all the way at the bottom to retrieve Excalibur, which in my opinion, I think they should have had the group split up, where half of the group is fighting the ice giants along with Urt, and then Kirito and a couple others are trying to defeat the boss. I think this could have made it a bit more exciting, and this is one of the main problems with a lot of arcs in the show, is just the fact that it gets really repetitive when the show basically only focuses on Kirito, and there are no other characters with their own original storylines or quests. Like, I still enjoyed the fights a lot, and I'm happy that all the characters are included in this arc, but I think it could have added more tension to each scene if we're constantly switching back and forth in between scenes, going from group to group. Plus it's like the kinfolk are still getting slain by the ice giants, like don't they matter at all to the group? But maybe I'm wrong. Later, when Kirito and the gang are making their way to the 3rd floor, they run into an NPC who goes by the name Lady Freya, which everyone thinks it's a trap, but Klein is just like, nah, I can't leave her. This could potentially be my future wife. And he even admits that he thinks it's a trap as well, and still decides to help her escape. Like, bro literally said, even if it makes them fail the quest, which will basically destroy all of ALO and kill Urt and the kinfolk, Klein's just like, I gotta do this anyways because I'm a good person. Like, bro, what? Klein is one of those characters that should have been written out a lot better in my opinion. Bro is just the biggest gooner of all time, but I still love Klein. The chick's just like, yeah, I need to retrieve my people's treasure that Thrimmer stole, and Klein's just like, alright, bet, like you can come with us. Which this is honestly the dumbest written part of the arc. They literally all just admitted that it's probably a trap and still decided to help her anyways, which they got lucky and it turns out that she wasn't evil, but still, they are on a huge time crunch and the stakes are very high for the characters. And it's like, bro, what? Like you all just admitted that it's probably a trap, but yet you were still willing to go along with it. I'm assuming it's part of the Norse mythology, so her character had to be in the show, but still, she could have been introduced in a better way, or just give Kirito and Klein's character a bit better writing there. Now they make their way to the final floor to fight the boss, which the overall pacing for these episodes really aren't that bad. Like they could have dragged this arc out for a lot longer like they did the Fairy Dance arc, so it doesn't really bother me having a small filler arc like this in the season. Now the mage that they rescued ended up boosting everyone's maximum HP, which it turns out that she is actually on their side, which I guess was kind of a plot twist for a lot of us, because I'm assuming most of us hadn't heard of the Norse mythology quest before, so we kinda came into thinking that Freya was most likely gonna end up betraying the group, which I guess ends up being a good decision. Now when we finally meet Thrimmer, this is where where they should have added some type of plot twist, where it turns out that they are actually on the wrong floor. Or maybe not the wrong floor, but the wrong side of the dungeon. And in this dungeon, it could have been like a trap room, similar to the one in Aincrad, Season 1, Episode 3. And then afterwards, they would have to find the actual boss room before time runs out. I think something like that could have spiced up this episode a bit more, while still being able to stick to the original quest. I think this arc was just lacking the element of surprise, and things were a bit too predictable. Now everyone makes it to the boss room where they confront Thrimmer, and we find out that the reason why Thrimmer had Freya imprisoned was because they were supposed to get married, but he caught her snooping around the treasure, is what he says. Which I gotta say, I liked Thrimmer at first, up until he implied that he's going to SA Freya after he is done with taking everyone out, which I don't even want to go into this. Just when I thought that we finally had a normal villain, he just had to go and say that and just ruin it. Now during the final boss fight, Freya's just like, yeah, so there's no way we can actually win this, but it actually turns out that there's a golden hammer that belongs to my people that is somewhere hidden in this room, which Kirito uses a lightning sword skill to be able to find the hammer, which once again, I think these sword skills and the magic involved in ALO, but more specifically in this arc, is so cool. And there are lots of cool uses for these sword skills, and it just would have been nice to have these in the fairy dance arc. But yeah, Kirito finds the hammer and tosses it to Freya for some reason, and Kirito's just like, oh damn, I should not have done that. And yeah, Klein's future wife turns into a man, which Klein's like, yeah, sorry honey, I think I'm gonna have to actually cancel the wedding. But it turns out that Freya is actually Thor, the god of thunder, or at least when holding the hammer she is. But Klein's like, yeah, I changed my mind, I still love you even though you are a dude. And yeah, they all attack together and beat Thrimmer, and to be honest, I thought the fight was alright. I think the death gun fight was a lot cooler. Even the fight against Sugo was better in my opinion, but maybe that's just because of how much I hate Sugo. And now Thor is just like, thank you, because of you my treasure has been returned and my disgrace avenged. He gives them the lightning hammer and is just like, alright, peace out. Which yeah, I guess it turns out that Freya was actually Thor. I don't really know how these folk tales go and the overall story behind it all. When I watched this arc for the first time, I was pretty confused, and even now I still have a lot of questions about the arc. Now the characters make their way down the stairs because apparently the elevator was out of order, which when Kirito pulls out the sword, it destroys Thrymheim, but luckily Tonki comes and saves them. Kirito throws the sword away because it's too powerful and game breaking, and then Sinon retrieves the sword and gives it back to him like a present, which Kirito accepts it as a present, and Sinon says that every time he draws it, she has to think about him. Like, bro, I'm sorry, but what is this writing here? Kirito literally has a girlfriend, and then all the other girls are also upset at Sinon, including Lifa. Like, there are certain things about this arc that just really don't make any sense, and are pretty uncomfortable to watch. It's crazy just how big of an improvement Alicization is compared to this. But yeah, the world tree and its blessings return back to Jotunheim, and they complete the quest. Now just to recap some things that could have made this arc better. 1. If they added trap rooms into the arc, it felt like everything was a little too straightforward, but this way they could have spiced things up a little bit while keeping the Norse mythology folktale true to its roots. 2. If they split up the storyline, having a couple characters go and stop the giants from attacking the kinfolk, this would have made it a bit more entertaining in my opinion. 3. Use more sword skills. Like, it would have been cool if they had to use a certain sword skill to get through each part of the castle. I think that could have added like a cool learning curve to the arc. But yeah, I still enjoyed the arc a lot. I love that the characters were all able to work together, and it shows just how much Kirito has grown throughout the series, and that he is no longer just a solo player, but someone who works well with others. The Mother's Rosario arc in Sword Art Online is one of the saddest yet most beautiful arcs in the series. While some people say that this arc is garbage and that the entire show should have been solely based in Aincrad and that this arc is just filler, I'm someone who disagrees with that, and I feel like this is one of the most important arcs in the series. So today, I'm gonna be doing a deep dive analysis into why this arc is so amazing, and why everyone hating on it is actually wrong. Now, this arc is not perfect by any means, and it has its flaws, but the overall positives definitely outweigh the few negatives within this arc. So yeah, let's get into it. Now I will say episode 1 does start off pretty slow, but that is because this arc is centered around the overall emotional growth of our protagonist, which for the first time in the series, Kirito is no longer the protagonist. The arc instead focuses on Asuna's storyline. Now in the beginning of the episode, we get some really deep dialogue where Asuna says that it's complicated between her and her family, and that she didn't know what she was fighting for at times in Sword Art Online because she feels she doesn't belong anywhere. And this gives us some underlying backstory to Asuna and why she was using VR gaming to escape the real world. Later, it turns out that there's an update in New Aincrad that unlocks floor 21 to 30, and if they can beat the boss on floor 21, then they can buy back their cabin on floor 22, which they defeat the floor boss together in a pretty cool fight and buy back their cabin. Now they discuss about a player who goes by the name Zekken that has apparently been beating everyone in duels non-stop and has held a tournament on the 24th floor to see if they can be defeated, which if someone can defeat Zekken, then they will be rewarded with a unique sword skill ability, which is an 11-hit combo, which is extremely powerful. Not even Kirito is able to beat Zekken apparently, and that makes Asuna feel suspicious about the entire thing, which is understandable because bro is literally the black swordsman and has never lost a duel. So considering that some random player that they had never heard of beat Kirito, I'd think something strange is up as well. Later, it's revealed to us about Asuna's home life. Her mom doesn't actually understand the bond between Asuna and her friends, and the overall connection of the online world. She wants Asuna to leave her current school that all the SAO players have been attending and take an exam to get into a different school that is considered a more prestigious school, so that way she'll be more on track for college. We see this in the real world with a lot of parents, where parents focus too much on what they want for their children, rather than trying to understand what is actually best for the child itself. This is definitely an arc that is really important in Sword Art Online, and I know a lot of people can deeply relate to her character in this arc. Now it's also revealed that Asuna's mom had Kirito investigated because Asuna and Kirito had been spending a lot of time together, which, like, gosh damn, this lady is an absolute psychopath. Like, you're trying to tell me that the guy that cleared the video game that everyone was trapped in for over 2 years, which saved her daughter's life, you're telling me that she had him investigated to see if he was a worthy fit to be with her daughter, and she somehow came to the conclusion that no, he isn't good enough, just because he doesn't come from a rich family? Like, what? Now, the character design for her is awesome because it's supposed to show the reason for Asuna's disconnection between her and her family, and it's very clear that Asuna's mom only cares about money and success rather than genuine connection and love. Later, Asuna is getting ready to fight Zekken when it turns out that Zekken is actually a girl, which Asuna starts to understand the reason why Kirito lost against her and is not very happy about it. Now they have an awesome duel, but in the end, Asuna loses, and afterwards, Zekken invites Asuna to come with her, without knowing where she is being taken. Now it turns out that the tournament Zekken had orchestrated was held to find someone worthy of joining her and her guild, who go by the name the Sleeping Knights, and is invited to go on a quest with them. Zekken tells Asuna that her name in the real world is Yuki, which is kind of funny because that's Asuna's last name in the real world. Now their guild needs one more member, which was why Yuki held that tournament, because she was trying to find someone who was really strong. Yuki's goal is for her and her guild to beat the floor 26 boss by themselves, so their names can be inscribed on the monument of swordsmen in the town of Beginnings in the Black Iron Palace. They have to defeat the floor 26 boss as a party without the help of any other party. If they have help from the other parties, then it's only the party leaders for each guild that will have their names written on the wall, and nobody else from the guild will, which Asuna gladly accepts Yuki's offer. The fights are really good in this arc, but it's still kind of a strange feeling how we barely see Kirito throughout this arc, but at the same time it's extremely refreshing. In a way, I feel like Asuna could have easily been the protagonist of Sword Art Online, fine, just as good if not better than Kirito. And I think it's because Asuna doesn't feel as overpowered as Kirito, but it might also be because we get more backstory to her character in this arc and see her struggles in the real world, which gives us more to relate to. Later, when Yuki's guild is approaching one of the floor bosses, they realize they are being spied on by another guild, so the other guild is basically cheating off of them by watching the boss fights and studying how the bosses attack, and if they keep allowing them to cheat, then it's the other guild that will be able to beat the boss and have their name scribed on the wall instead. They lose the fight against the boss and realize they have to get back to that floor boss as fast as possible to beat it before the other players cheating off of them do. But when they finally make their way back, they are too late. Another big group of players are standing in the way of the boss room and refuse to move. But Yuki, being the badass she is, she doesn't take no for an answer and she goes full beast mode on the players guarding the room. And right before Yuki attacks, she says an extremely important line in the show. It's simple, yet perfect. Sometimes you have to fight to get your point across, which this also correlates back to Asuna's relationship with her mom, about how she can't give up, and how she needs to make her mom understand the importance of the digital world, and the friends that she has made along the way. And right as they are getting surrounded, Kirito pulls up with Yui to help out, and Bro pulls out the Excalibur sword that he had received in the Calibur Arc, which is pretty badass. A huge fight breaks out, and Asuna goes full freaking beast mode, and Yui's guild makes it to the boss room, while Kirito and Klein hold off the rest. They enter the boss room, and an awesome battle takes immense. They end up beating the boss room, and they head back to Asuna's cabin to celebrate. Yuki appears to be very emotionally distant from Asuna. Every time she tries getting closer, Yuki and the group pull away. But it doesn't feel as if it's a "I don't like you" type of distancing. It's more like a secret they are hiding. They later get their names inscribed and take a picture together as a group to celebrate, but Yuki starts to break down, and before Asuna can ask what's wrong, Yuki logs out. The rest of the guild also pushes Asuna away, and this is where we the viewer can relate to Asuna's pain, because sometimes people in life push you away because they don't want to see you get hurt, and they do this without explaining why, which ends with you feeling lost and confused. Kirito finds out Yuki's location and gives it to Asuna, which it turns out that Yuki in the real world is terminally ill with AIDS from a blood transfusion her mom had when she was being born. Yuki has been living in the hospital inside this machine called the Medinki Void, which is basically some type of machine that works with the Amusphere rig to block out pain response for the patients who are extremely ill. It works as kind of like a general anesthetic, and this is why Yuki didn't want to see Asuna anymore. She had formed a deep connection to Asuna and knows her life is coming to an end, so she felt like she needed to push Asuna away to protect her. Yuki has been in there for over 3 years, which is a year longer than Kirito and Asuna were trapped in SAO for. Yuki's parents had passed 2 years ago, and her sister just last year. Asuna uses the Amusphere rig in the other room to see Yuki, and Yuki explains that the reason the group is disbanding is because her and another guild member got the news that they only have 3 months left to live, and that if any of the group members pass away, then they want the final boss raid they did to be the last thing they did together as a team. Kirito sets up a camera so that Yuki can experience going to school with Asuna and the other real-life experiences throughout the next couple of months. Later, during a deep conversation between Yuki and Asuna, Yuki relates to Asuna about her once not feeling connected to her mom, and she teaches Asuna how to open up and share her true feelings to her mom. Asuna makes her mom use the Amusphere rig, and they have a deep conversation. Asuna explains how the life she lives has to be a life that doesn't just make her happy, but a life that fulfills other people and makes them happy as well. Asuna's mom breaks down crying, and she fully understands and apologizes. Asuna spends as much time as she can with Yuki and the other guild members over the next 3 months, but gets a message one day from the doctor saying that Yuki's condition has changed for the worse. Asuna meets with Yuki inside of New Aincrad for the last time, and it is there that Yuki gifts Asuna her 11-hit sword skill, which she calls it the Mother's Rosario. The rest of the group come to say their goodbyes to Yuki, and unlike the other deaths in SAO that were sudden and brutal, this is the first one that really draws our emotions out to the full extent, not just ours but the characters as well. The arc focuses on friendship, memory, and the impact of Yuki and the other characters as well. Asuna starts the arc trapped between expectations, her family, her future, who she's supposed to be with, but it is here that Yuki lives freely because her time is limited and she wanted to have what time she had left to make an impact on others. And it is through being friends with Yuki that Asuna realizes that she wants to do the same. But yeah, I personally think that this is one of the most underrated arcs in the series. Season 2 of SAO definitely gets way too much hate, and I will always be one to love this arc. So everyone knows that there's 6 main arcs in Sword Art Online. The Aincrad arc, the Fairy Dance arc, the Phantom Bullet arc, the Calibur arc, the Mother's Rosario arc, and the Alicization arc, which I like to count Alicization and War of Underworlds as one arc. But did you know that there is a secret hidden arc in SAO? In 2013, Sword Art Online came out with its first movie that goes by the name Sword Art Online Extra Edition. But unlike the other movies that are built around an overall in-depth plot, this movie centers around Kirito talking to Kikuoka about his time trapped in SAO, recapping important events that happened, while simultaneously switching to scenes of Asuna, Lifa, Lisbeth, and Silica at the pool, where Kirito is supposed to meet up with them after he's done talking with Kikuoka. Now, the first hour and 20 minutes of this movie is really nothing special, but right as you get to the last 20 minutes, we get an interesting little side story. It starts off with the gang chilling at a beach inside of ALO, where they had heard a supposed rumor about a quest in the south of Sylph territory that has a whale in it. Months prior, Kirito and Asuna had told Yui about the time they saw a whale in Aincrad, which makes Yui upset because she has never seen one before, which is why they are going on this quest, so that Yui can have the luxurious experience of witnessing what the great sea creature, aka the whale, looks like, which Klein starts having a mental breakdown when he sees the girls change back into their avatar clothing as they are getting ready to make their way to the dungeon, which bro is like 24 and these girls are like 13. Like, I don't know what the author was thinking when writing this. Like, this is disgusting. Now, they make their way to the underground dungeon that is sitting a whopping 100 meters beneath the lake, and use the coordinates that they were given to fly over it to where they see an enormous hole that is sitting in the middle of the lake. Asuna casts a water breath spell for the group, and they swim all the way down to the bottom, where they find what looks to be like the lost city of Atlantis. After making it to the bottom, they are met with a mysterious NPC who looks like they've been standing there for who knows how long. They accept the quest, which involves retrieving a pearl that had been stolen by a group of thieves, and they have to do it quickly before the group of rascals that stole the pearl return back to their hideout. Lifa gets a weird feeling that she's seen the man's name from somewhere before, but she can't quite remember where from, and the man promises to reward them generously if they are successful. They begin the quest and make their way through the dungeon, which I just gotta say that the aesthetic design for this is really good. The long dark hallways, beautiful lighting, and the fish swimming by. From an overall aesthetic standpoint, this arc is really good. The dialogue for this quest starts off not good, but intriguing. Lifa has been feeling uncomfortable being underwater, which makes Klein tell Kirito that he should go check on her, but Kirito explains how it feels weird between them when they're in a party together, but when it's just them and nobody else, then it's not weird between them, which that really doesn't make any sense to me. If anything, you would think it would be less awkward because there's more people in the group, so there's more distractions and people to talk to, which right as we're starting to get some actual good deep emotional dialogue about how Kirito has been feeling, he falls into a random whirlpool along with Klein, which it's not like it was a trapped floorboard that they stepped onto or anything. Like, it was literally a blatantly obvious whirlpool just sitting there. Like, come on. After getting pulled out, a giant fish comes flying out of the whirlpool and chases Kirito and Klein, trying to attack them. The fish's head doesn't take damage, so Kirito distracts the fish while everyone else attacks. Lifa was given direct orders by Kirito to stay back and use magic, but she's like, nah, screw that, and attacks the fish anyways, because she had promised herself that no matter what, she would follow him anywhere, which her plan fails because the fish creates a giant water tornado, which almost throws her into the whirlpool, which Kirito jumps over the water tornado onto the sea ceiling to get over top of it without being sucked in, and gets the coolest kill on the fish. Like, this is low-key one of the most creative kills in Sword Art Online history, which is kind of funny. Kirito saves Leafa from the whirlpool, and she has a flashback scene to when she had fell into a pond, and he had apparently saved her from drowning, which I don't know how you drown in a pond. Like, the pond really doesn't look that deep. I don't know what the creator was thinking with this, but yeah, they keep making their way through this underground dungeon, or whatever you want to call it, where they battle crabs and other types of aquatic beasts, while their mascot Yui cheers the group on, which they get to the room that has the pearl, and head back to the guy. And right as Kirito hands over the pearl, the group gets this weird hunch that something is up, because they never saw the thieves that the guy had told them about, which when taking a closer look at the pearl, it actually turns out to be an egg. Kirito yells out "Plunderers of the Deep Sea," which I have no idea what that means. Maybe it's the name of the quest or something to do with the man, I have no idea. Now the guy tries taking the egg back, but Kirito and Asuna are like, no way. Now the guy turns into a giant squid, and the letters on his name are rearranged to spell Kraken, also known as the Abyss Lord, which Kraken turns out to be the sea demon from Norse mythology. That's why Leafa was confused earlier when she first saw the name, because it looked familiar to her. The egg that they had retrieved is the egg of the royal child, which he wasn't able to retrieve himself because of the magic barrier that was blocking him from entering the dungeon. A huge fight breaks out, and Kirito somehow uses a flame sword skill underwater. Like, bro, what? I don't understand the decision making there on that part. The stats for the octopus are apparently higher than any boss in New Aincrad, which is kinda interesting. And right as they are about to get attacked, a spear comes flying down, and Leviathan, the Sea Lord, appears, which I'm assuming is part of the Norse mythology quest, which it turns out that these two are well acquainted and don't like each other. Kraken backs off and spews a bunch of stuff about Norse mythology, which I have no understanding of. Basically, Kraken was going to take the power of the child within the egg and rise against someone powerful. Leviathan takes the egg somewhere safe and the quest is complete, which Leviathan calls upon a whale to take them back to shore, where Yui finally gets to see a whale in person for the first time, which was the whole point of them going on this little quest to begin with. Overall, this arc, or quest, whatever you want to call it, wasn't anything serious. It was mainly just fan service harem nonsense. I'm pretty sure that this takes place directly after the fairy dance arc as well. It would have been cool to actually get some deep emotional dialogue between Kirito and Sugu so that maybe we can finally see her move on from her brother, but unfortunately we didn't get that. I thought I would make a video on this for fun because I feel like a lot of people haven't seen this, but yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it this far, please be sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, that's all I got. Peace.